Seeing a need is one thing, but meeting a need is even better. You see, sometimes a problem can open up a whole world of possibilities. That's what Emma Whitmore learned. In the late 1800s, she was a society woman in New York City with wealth and connections that anyone would envy. But she would come to scorn her wealth for the sake of the needy. She saw that the young women working on the streets needed homes to get out of their dire circumstances. On October 25th, this month in history in 1890, she opened the first door of hope. By the end of her life, there would be 97 homes operating in 7 different countries.
Emma Whitmore and her husband Sidney were not brooding philanthropists looking for ways to spend their fortune on errands of mercy. They were actually quite content in their life of luxury. Busy with parties and balls, they would use their fortune to pay the wages of many servants and caterers of their extravagant events. A friend of the Whitmores convinced her to attend a meeting led by an evangelist at the local YMCA. Coincidentally, Sidney, her husband, also attended the meeting. Neither of them knew the other was in attendance. During the meeting, they were both deeply convicted about how they had neglected the pain and suffering that was abundant in the world. Individually, they each committed their lives to change right then and there.
Emma's friend asked her to attend another meeting. This one was led by ex-convict Jerry McCauley. Jerry was known as a notorious river thief. Charged with highway robbery at the age of 18, McCauley was sent to the infamous correctional center Sing Sing. In prison, the young man encountered Jesus, and his life began to change. He was pardoned and released by the age of 26. When he returned to a life of freedom, McCauley founded the first rescue mission to support the underprivileged of New York City. Jerry McCauley's incredible story drew Emma and Sidney Whitmore to one of these meetings. What they encountered changed their lives.
Never can that night be erased from my memory. From the time we got off the car at Roosevelt Street, each step opened up some new horror. There was cursing, fighting, police violence, and folks dragged off to jail. The smell was unbearable, and the speaker's manner was more rough around the edges than they were used to. We both reviled the poor creatures that filled the dance hall that evening. As the meeting progressed, however, God got such possession of Sidney, and later of myself also, that we were both held in painful silence as we were convicted of our useless lives. We no longer felt superior to the poor creatures, but actually hung our heads in shame.
As McCauley preached the word, the meeting eventually transitioned to personal testimonies. One by one, people in McCauley's rescue mission would come up to the front, praising the Lord that they were kept from their sins, despite their daily temptations. Emma and Sidney saw signs of genuine transformation. As Emma's journal entry tells us,
these people were truly transformed and possessed the genuine thing and not the veneer that characterized some professed Christians in the social circle that had engrossed our time and thought.
Overcome with emotion, Sidney Whitmore requested prayer as he hid his face in his hands, weeping. Emma notes that he was such a, quote, stiff Presbyterian that even she was surprised at his display of emotion. That night, she journaled.
I thought he had never appeared nobler or braver in my eyes. I could not let him stand alone. Where he would go, I would go.
At the meeting, Emma stood by her husband in support. As they knelt at the altar, the wealthy couple was encircled by an unlikely cluster of saints.
There was a drunkard, a thief, and a tramp on my husband's side, and on my side, 1 or 2 poor women. We arose with a holy determination born of God himself to henceforth live for his glory and praise. From that night, I date the giving up of a worldly life.
Eager to see the souls won to Christ, Emma and Sidney could frequently be found at Jerry McCauley's mission, the very place they said they would visit only once.
For Emma, that night at McCauley's mission was the first step in her transformation. She committed her life to making difference in the lives of others. But looking back, we can see God was steering her toward the mission long before she and her husband attended that meeting.
12 years before, Emma Whitmore had suffered a fall and fractured one of her lower vertebrae. She had constant discomfort and frequent severe pain that rendered her bedridden. The stairs were out of the question, and oftentimes her husband had to carry her. The condition progressed so severely that she had moments when death seemed more desirable than life. After years of suffering, a healing minister by the name of A.B. Simpson caught her attention. He was the founder of the notable Christian Missionary Alliance, and Emma was just curious enough to attend. Skeptical, Emma walked out of the first healing meeting. Her own pastor tried to persuade her from getting her hopes up, but in spite of her doubts, she found herself attending more meetings at Simpson's church. She wondered, could God heal her? In order to settle the matter once and for all, Emma withdrew from the noisy world. For 4 days, she shut herself away with her Bible. On the 4th day, she asked God for healing, and then she waited. She wrote in her journal, "He enabled me to claim healing upon the authority of His word."
A voice of encouragement came from her own little boy, who assured his mother that God would indeed heal her. So she got out of bed with faith and determination. The following evening, as she was getting ready for bed, she bent into a position that would usually cause her agony. This time, she only felt a bruising sensation. She knew she had been healed. One night soon after, Emma was spending time alone with God. In an earnest moment, she asked the Lord, what should she do with her healing? Here's what happened in her own words.
Suddenly, the girls on the street came to my mind so forcibly that it was not difficult to almost imagine I could hear the tramp of numberless feet going straight to damnation.
But the mere thought of working with those women brought terror to her soul. Oh, anything but that, she pleaded. But after a moment of profound silence, she realized in her heart she was severely lacking in love. She knew that if she disobeyed, she would lose an amazing opportunity to experience the presence of God. So she agreed to the task, thrusting herself into mission work.
The horrors we witnessed nearly overpowered us. Often after such nights of tramping the streets, I have dropped upon my knees as I reached home and in tears cried out, "Oh Lord, I cannot see these fearful sights again. It simply breaks my heart."
Emma's obedience led to the founding of the Door of Hope Mission House on October 25th, this month in history, in 1890. After 4 years, the mission had helped over 300 young women. Emma's main concern was to introduce them to Christ, then help meet their material needs, and finally, instruct them on how to introduce others to the gospel. Emma recalls a conversation she had with a 15-year-old girl with a new baby and no home.
After a brief conversation, I informed her that we had not thought of taking children. Before I could explain any further, big tears flowed down her face as she said, "Oh, I'd rather walk the streets and starve with my baby in my arms than to have a place to stay and give him up. Every place I've been refuses to take me because I have a baby, but I just won't give him up. I love him too much to let him go." I concluded it was no time for talking, so I simply replied, "Well, dear, let us kneel together and ask what the Lord wants us to do." With my arm around the trembling shoulders, I could somehow better appreciate the depths of the motherly love that was in her heart, even though she was only a child herself. I offered fervent prayer on her behalf, and before arising from our knees, the matter was settled. I pressed a kiss on her cheek as I said, "Hannah, dear child, I'll take you both. You may bring your baby."
Emma Whitmore submitted her life and her plans to God's will and allowed Him to shape the mission of her life. Even when she was already reaching out, the Lord prompted her to reach a little further. Women, children, anyone who needed a little hope. Emma Whitmore never stopped reaching, until eventually she was reaching across the globe. By the time of Emma's death in 1931, 97 Door of Hope locations had been established all around the world.